Sunlight poured across the gentle hills, illuminating a patchwork of wildflower fields no camera could fully capture. The meadow was in full bloom, each flower stretching skyward with delicate petals that danced in the breeze. Beyond the roads and fences, beyond the familiar hum of distant tractors, a figure walked with careful steps. Her name was Ebony Rivera. She was a scientist at heart, a researcher who specialized in honeybee behavior. Her colleagues often teased that she cared more for her bees than for human interactions. Yet Ebony had a tender heart bound up in lab notebooks and data charts. When the university offered her the chance to study honeybee pollination in a rural setting, she jumped at the opportunity. Ebony believed that direct observation of bees in their natural habitat was indispensable to her work. For months, she had analyzed satellite imagery, climate charts, and historical flower bloom records, zeroing in on a region renowned for flower farming. Now she had arrived, eyes gleaming with anticipation as she watched a cloud of bees hover over a thicket of lavender. She'd parked her small rental car at the edge of a gravel path that overlooked fields filled with lupins, daisies, crimson poppies, and sunflowers. The cacophony of colors set her pulse racing. She grabbed her notebook and binoculars and ventured past a low wooden fence, stepping closer to the bejeweled meadow buzzing with life. She didn't expect to meet anyone her first day. A reticent person by nature, Ebony was content setting up her gear alone. But soon she was greeted by the warm welcome of Rowan Fletcher. Rowan, a flower farmer whose family had cultivated these acres for generations, arrived on his tractor, shutting off the rumbling engine when he spotted her. He hopped down, dusted off his hat, and offered a broad smile. Ebony noticed his sun-burnished cheeks and friendly gray eyes. She explained that she was a researcher studying honeybee behavior and pollination. Rowan nodded thoughtfully, his gaze lingering over the boxes and equipment stuffed in the trunk of her car. "You're on Fletcher property," he said kindly. "This entire field is ours. I'm more than happy to invite you to look around, but I ask that you let me know if you need to conduct any large-scale experiments. We have our own bees, you see, and I want them protected." Ebony felt her skin flush. "Oh, absolutely. I'll be very careful. I mostly need to observe the bees in action, nothing that would harm or interfere with them." "Perfect," Rowan replied. He extended his hand, and Ebony shook it, pleasantly surprised by the gentle warmth in his firm grip. "Well, it's a pleasure to have someone taking an interest in pollination beyond collecting honey. If you need anything, you can come by the farmhouse up on that rise." He pointed to a white structure perched at a gentle elevation. "I'm usually out in the fields, though. Don't be shy." That day, Ebony carefully set up her station at a corner of the field, using only minimal markers to define her observation areas. She systematically documented how bees hopped from flower to flower, how often they returned to the hive, and how far they would roam if the blossoms ran scarce. There was something mesmerizing about their constant movement, their ephemeral dances, the delicate brush of their tiny feet against petals awash in morning dew. It wasn't the sort of research she could do stuck in an office or in a cramped lab. Here, the entire meadow was both her domain and the bees' kingdom. Every so often, Ebony glimpsed Rowan in the distance. His posture revealed him as strong, yet at ease with the world. He handled crates, repaired fencing, and managed irrigation lines with effortless grace. Sometimes he would stop to admire the flowers, letting a slow smile spread across his face, the look of a person profoundly in love with the land he cared for. Around mid-afternoon, Ebony noticed Rowan approaching on foot. He carried a small basket in one hand and a folding chair in the other. "Mind if I join you for a bit?" he asked, raising the basket. "Brought lemonade and some sandwiches if you're hungry. Comes from my mother's recipe, the best lemonade around." Ebony, somewhat startled by his thoughtfulness, nodded with an appreciative grin. "That's so kind of you. Thank you. I'd love a glass." They sat side by side, Ebony at her portable stool and Rowan in his folding chair, sipping lemonade and nibbling on the sandwiches. The tangy citrus flavor paired with the warm sun overhead gave Ebony a sense of peace she rarely felt outside her datasets. She showed Rowan her notes, letting him see how she recorded nectar availability and bee flight patterns. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions that reflected his own deep knowledge of flower cultivation. Before long, she realized their work, though different in scope, was focused in the same direction: a desire to help flowers flourish and to keep bees thriving. Over the following days, Ebony rose early, measuring dew points and capturing video of bees at sunrise. At times, she politely asked Rowan or his farm hands to hold off on certain tasks if she needed to capture a specific pollination window. While Ebony wasn't used to having so many people around, she admired Rowan's team. They respected her passion, even though some teased her about being a city scientist. If she overheard their teasing, she shrugged it off. Ebony's priority was the bees. When Rowan caught wind of the teasing, he firmly insisted everyone show her courtesy. Ebony smiled inwardly at his subtle defense, appreciating his efforts more than he probably realized. One sunny afternoon, Ebony saw Rowan training a younger worker on how to handle a delicate patch of rare blooms that had just come into season. The worker seemed nervous, uncertain of how to proceed. Rowan demonstrated a gentle hand, lightly brushing pollen from stamen to pistil, allowing the worker to witness the difference between rough treatment and precise, caring attention. Ebony watched from a distance, heart warmed by Rowan's deliberate kindness. He took the same nurturing approach with his flowers that Ebony took with her bees: gentle, protective, and genuinely invested in life's delicate balances. When Rowan happened to glance her way, Ebony gave him a supportive smile. He waved and called out, "Care to join us, Ebony? We were just discussing the synergy between bees and these delicate poppies. You might have insights." She set down her camera gear and hurried over, excited to be invited. That day, Ebony spent hours exchanging knowledge with Rowan. He would point out the subtle differences in the flower petals, explaining which modifications he was making to strengthen the bloom's resistance to pests. In turn, she revealed details of the bees' dances, connecting how each swirl of movement informed other bees where to find nectar. They might as well have been the only two people in the world, so immersed were they in each other's words. As harvest time approached for certain flower varieties, Ebony's research hit a critical juncture. She needed to systematically track how bees would react to new blooms introduced at odd intervals, especially if Rowan rotated or harvested patches unpredictably. While Ebony valued her carefully planned method, she realized she also needed Rowan's cooperation in adjusting his schedule, which might inconvenience him. The thought of making demands of someone who had been so welcoming left her feeling uneasy. Finally, over dinner at his farmhouse, a modest wooden structure that reminded Ebony of a painting she had once seen, they broached the subject. Rowan had invited her for an evening meal, telling her it was high time she tried a home-cooked country dinner. Inside the farmhouse, the aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the scent of lavender that had been tucked into a small porcelain vase on the kitchen table. Ebony instantly felt at ease. She took a seat at the long oak table, smoothing her skirt self-consciously. "You've made an impression on everyone," Rowan remarked, as he placed a casserole dish filled with baked vegetables and herbs at the center of the table. "I know you have some requests regarding the harvest schedule. Let's talk about them." Ebony sat up, meeting his gaze. His gray eyes were attentive and encouraging, as though he truly wanted to make her research possible. "I really appreciate your willingness to listen," she began. "I'd like to delay the harvest of the southwestern quadrant for a week, maybe two, so I can document how bees respond to the prolonged presence of those particular blooms. But I understand it might complicate your rotation schedule." Rowan took a moment to consider. "If the southwestern quadrant is left unharvested for another week or two, it might push back my timeline for replanting. But it's not impossible. We can shift tasks around if we plan carefully." You're the expert on the bees. If you say it's necessary, we'll work on it. I'll just need your help explaining the situation to the farmhands." Relief coursed through Ebony. She hadn't realized how tense she'd been about this request. "Thank you," she said earnestly, leaning forward. "I promise not to be more trouble than necessary. This data is so important for my research and for the bees in general. If we can improve pollination strategies, it has a ripple effect on the environment." That's the dream. After dinner, they lingered at the table, sharing stories about their families. Rowan's late grandfather had started the farm with just a single acre, gradually expanding as he discovered which flowers thrived in the local climate. Ebony recounted her grandmother's stories of collecting honey in old jars, back when Ebony would stay with her for summers. Those childhood memories had sparked her passion for honeybees, eventually leading her to become a researcher devoted to their study. It was close to midnight when Ebony stepped out onto the farmhouse's wraparound porch with Rowan by her side. Crickets chirped in the tall grass, and the moon threw silver patterns across the rolling fields. She found herself reluctant to leave the comforting glow of Rowan's home. He walked her to her car, where they paused, silence spinning between them like spider silk. Ebony felt her heart flutter with a new awareness. She realized that somewhere between analyzing hive behavior and exploring fields of wildflowers, she had come to look forward to seeing Rowan each day. Whether it was a wave from across the meadow or a longer conversation about pollination, he was in her thoughts more than she expected. And judging by the gentle light in his eyes, he might feel a similar pull. Over the next week, Ebony came to the farm at dawn, as she always did. But she also stayed later each day. She found herself helping Rowan and his crew in small ways, stacking crates, checking irrigation lines, labeling rows of newly planted flowers. She brushed off the dust that settled on her clothes as she jumped in to help, surprising even herself. While Ebony had spent years in university labs, the flower farm had awakened a different side of her. She reveled in being outdoors, breathing fresh air, and working with her hands. The lines between scientific observer and helpful friend blurred. Rowan's mother, Adeline, came to visit the farm one afternoon. Ebony had heard plenty of stories about her from the farmhands, how she was a whirlwind of energy, unstoppable in the kitchen, unwavering in support. She had a discerning eye, they said, capable of identifying which blooms would produce the sweetest scents and which farmhands needed an encouraging voice. When Ebony and Rowan approached Adeline, she instantly enveloped Ebony in a warm hug, something Ebony wasn't entirely used to, yet it felt genuine. "I've heard so much about you," Adeline said, stepping back and holding Ebony by the shoulders. "Rowan won't stop talking about all your research with the bees. I hope you're finding everything you need on our land." Ebony smiled, cheeks flushing. "I can't thank you and Rowan enough for letting me work here. Even the bees seem especially happy in these fields." Adeline gave a knowing nod, then looked sideways at Rowan before turning her attention back to Ebony. "You'll have to join me for tea and honey ginger cookies before you go. We might even rope you into our harvest celebration if you're still around." Ebony promised she'd love to join. As the older woman walked off, Ebony noticed Rowan's gaze, a mix of pride and warmth. It ignited a spark in Ebony's chest that she didn't fully understand, something more potent than gratitude, carrying the sweetness of possibility. As Ebony's research progressed, she accumulated data that she knew would shape future academic papers. More than that, she sensed her life was also changing in ways no graph could depict. She found Rowan in her thoughts at odd hours, replaying conversations about everything from flower seeds to dreams for the future. In quiet moments, she'd peek at him through her binoculars, not to spy, but just to admire how he interacted with the land he loved. In turn, he found excuses to join her in the meadow, curious to see if the bees had made any new discoveries. On slow afternoons, they strolled through untouched sections of the wildflower fields, marveling at the medley of scents and the subtle differences between one blossom and the next. One evening, they both ended up working late, Ebony taking notes on temperature fluctuations while Rowan inspected the irrigation system. As dusk teased the horizon, they found themselves standing in the heart of the field, surrounded by golden light. The bees had mostly returned to their hives, leaving the flowers quiet and still, except for the occasional soft rustle from a passing breeze. Ebony looked up, drawn to Rowan's presence. The strain of the day slipped away as he extended a hand toward her. "It's beautiful here," she whispered, turning in a slow circle to take in the scene. "I'm amazed every day." He stepped closer so that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cool air. "I never tire of it," he said. "And sometimes I think it's even more beautiful when someone else appreciates it as much as I do." Her heart sped up at the subtle compliment. She found herself wishing they could remain there indefinitely, suspended in the calm hush of twilight. A distant whistle sounded, likely a farmhand calling it a day. Still, they lingered for a long moment, gazing at each other while the sun dipped below the horizon. Finally, Roland moved to walk her to her car. As they neared the fence line, Ebony couldn't resist the sudden swell of emotion. She turned to him, voice soft. "Thank you for everything. Working with you has changed how I view my research, and unconsciously, maybe how I view my life." He smiled, and though the light was dimming, Ebony could still see warmth in his eyes. "I am glad," he replied. His hand rested at her elbow for a brief moment, steady and reassuring. "I know it's changed me too." That night, Ebony lay in her small rental cottage at the edge of town, replaying the day in her mind. She felt a flutter of anticipation that she couldn't quite name, a thrill that rose from more than just successful data collection. The next morning, Ebony woke determined to push forward with the last phase of her study. She outlined the tasks on a notepad: one final pollination experiment, some thorough hive inspections, and an analysis of how different flower species influence the bees' flight patterns. Soon her research window would close, and Ebony would be due back at the university to process the results. But the thought of leaving the farm and Rowan unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Day by day, Ebony completed her trials. Every time Rowan asked how long she'd stay, she answered, "A few more days," or "one more assessment." Yet she felt the clock ticking toward an ending she wasn't ready to face. Her last task involved a series of photographs to document flower variances, which she hoped to correlate with changes in bee foraging habits. Early one evening, she set up her tripod near a bright patch of asters, carefully adjusting the lens and capturing images of the purple blossoms as the bees finished their evening flights. Even the camera's shutter clicks sounded forlorn, a reminder that she was finishing her fieldwork. With the photography nearly complete, Ebony decided to head up to the farmhouse. Feeling an inexplicable desire to see Rowan, she expected him to be in the barn where equipment was stored, but he wasn't there. After a brief search, she found him in the field, kneeling near a row of sunflowers. One large bloom had wilted with an apparent fungal infection. He looked up as she approached. "Just finishing up," he said with a wan smile. "This isn't a big issue, but it'll need some care." She knelt next to him, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. "You dedicate yourself wholeheartedly. The plants are lucky to have you." His expression softened. "The bees are lucky to have you, Ebony," he replied, voice hushed. "We all are." For a moment, the evening light danced in his eyes, and she sensed how close they were, physically and in spirit. Despite his earthy smell of soil and flowers, or perhaps because of it, she felt drawn to him. Slowly, he reached for her hand and intertwined their fingers. Ebony's breath caught in her throat. "I wish you didn't have to leave," he admitted quietly, looking away as if revealing a vulnerability he rarely let surface. "This summer's been one of the best I've had. Working with you, learning from you, it's made me see the farm through new eyes." Ebony's heart skittered. She squeezed his hand softly, drawing his gaze back to her. "I don't want to leave either," she said, voice trembling with honesty, "but my duties at the university my entire life are waiting." I'm not sure how to reconcile that with the pull I feel to stay here. Rowan nodded, face clouded by concern. I know you can't just abandon your career. You've worked so hard for it. He lowered his head. I guess I hoped you might consider. He paused, struggling for words. Maybe not leaving permanently? Or maybe consider the possibility of returning, making this place part of your life? Or me? Ebony's chest tightened, tears edging her vision. She knew she could process calculations about bee flight speed in minutes, but deciding what to do with her own heart was more complex than any research. She had started out purely intent on collecting data, but she had found something she hadn't realized she was missing. The next day was bittersweet. Ebony gathered her final data sets, said her goodbyes to the farmhands, and packed up most of her equipment. She couldn't bring herself to see Rowan until sunset, not wanting to break down in front of everyone. Finally, she confronted the moment. At the far edge of the field, near a cluster of coneflowers, she found him waiting. He stood facing the setting sun, arms folded, shoulders slightly hunched as though bracing himself. Hey, she said softly, approaching. The weight in her voice spoke volumes. He turned and held her gaze. No words could mask their shared awareness that this might be their final evening together. The rustle of tall grass was the only sound. At length, Rowan stepped forward. You'll have to mail me copies of your published research, he tried to joke, but his voice quavered. At least let me read the breakthroughs this data leads to. Ebony bit her lip, uncertain whether to laugh or cry. That's a promise, she said, attempting a smile, but I'd rather share it with you in person. A flicker of hope crossed his face. Does that mean? She inhaled deeply, surveying the fields one last time, seeing them now in a wholly new light. Fields of possibility, if only she had the courage to say yes to this unexpected turn. In her mind, she recalled each moment she spent under the golden sun with Rowan, from the first day he offered her lemonade to their last quiet conversation. The memory swelled within her, resonating in every corner of her heart. She knew that if she left without intention, she'd carry an ache more potent than any yearning for scientific discovery. I'll go back to the university, she said, voice trembling but sure. I'll finalize the data, write up my papers, and speak with my department head. But I don't want this used to end in a farewell. I want to find a way to come back, to be part of this place. With you. Rowan's eyes shone. He closed the distance between them in a single step, his arms enveloping her in a strong embrace. Ebony felt the textured grain of his denim shirt against her cheek, his heartbeat drumming a reassuring cadence. Being in his arms felt as natural as breathing. She wrapped her arms around him, letting her defenses fall away. Finally, he tilted her chin up and searched her eyes, asking for silent permission. Ebony leaned in, and their lips met in a gentle, tender kiss that tasted of sweet promise like honey from the fields that had brought them together. They stood there as the sun slipped below the horizon, its last rays of light illuminating their embrace. When at last they pulled apart, Ebony tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Rowan traced a small flower petal that had been caught in her curls, brushing it away with delicate care. You'll come back? He asked, as if afraid to believe it fully. Ebony nodded, tears brimming. I will, she said. This is only the beginning. Knowing that they would soon part, if only temporarily, they walked back to the farmhouse, hand in hand. The bees were tucked in their hives, drifting into slumber, but the promise of another day excited them just the same. Ebony and Rowan talked about possible ways to merge their worlds, speaking about new pollination studies, about the farm's future expansions, about city-based lecture series, where Rowan could share the perspective of a seasoned flower farmer. The horizon seemed boundless, offering them not just a single path, but a tapestry of potential woven by love and dedication. Later, Ebony would reflect on this summer as one that forever changed her course. She had come seeking knowledge of bees, yet found something infinitely sweeter than honey. And though she could never precisely chart the flight pattern that led her heart to Rowan's, she recognized it was the most natural, life giving dance of all. Each day she had spent in the field, listening to the hum of bees, had quietly led her into a brand new season of life. In the hush of dusk, she discovered that love too can blossom in a sunlit meadow, growing strong and sure, nurtured by gentle hands, and guided by the sweetest promise of tomorrow.